Recovery means to me is freedom and peace.
There is hope.
Recovery is awesome.
Recovery works.
Recovery is possible. There is hope.
Recovery is possible. There is hope.
Recovery to me means freedom. Recovery is possible.
Recovery works. Recovery is always possible. It's fantastic.
Progress, not perfection.
Recovery is possible.
Recovery works.
Recovery is a journey, not a destination.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Recovery Talks. I'm Andy Daniel, Technology Coordinator with MPN, and I'm here with Karin Fried. She's a professional organizer and an advanced hoarding specialist based outside of Missoula, Montana. Welcome, Karin.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I am, as you said, a professional organizer and hoarding specialist. I work mostly with people that have a lot of clutter, chronic disorganization, and hoarding issues. I work with regular clients, but I also kind of specialize in more advanced clutter. So anything from just basic clutter to really pretty severe hoarding issues.
All right. So can you explain to our listeners what hoarding exactly is or is not?
It's complicated. Most people, they use that term way too loosely. In fact, these days, we don't actually even use that term. Anytime somebody has a lot of clutter, they say, you're a hoarder, you're hoarding. And that is not actually technically correct. There are so many different types of clutter, and there's different reasons for having it. You have your situational disorganization, which is everybody has it. You know, you're upset, depressed, you lost your job, you're not going to be cleaning. There's the chronic disorganization, which is having a past history of disorganization and self-help efforts have failed. There's an undermining of the quality of life and the expectation of future disorganization. When we get into hoarding, there is actually a medical definition. In 2013, it became an actual own diagnosis. And there's basically 4 parts to it. There's the difficulty discarding. You can't discard things even though their actual value isn't really there. There is the difficulty is due to perceived need to save the items and distress associated with discarding. So there's these strong urges to save and you're not discarding. The difficulty discarding results in accumulation of possessions, and they congest the active living area. So you have excessive clutter, and then you have the distress or impaired functioning, reducing your quality of life. So difficulty discarding, strong urges to save, excessive clutter, not being able to release, and distress associated with it. So some people have the excessive acquisition, but they might be able to release. Some people, maybe they don't acquire things, but nothing ever leaves the house. If things aren't leaving the house and you keep bringing things in, all of a sudden you're going to have too much. There's some people that they understand they have issues with clutter, and there's some people, no matter what you tell them, they don't think it's a problem. So again, it's very complex. But just because you have clutter, just because you have a whole bunch of stuff and you can barely walk in your home, doesn't mean you have hoarding disorder, okay? That is a clinical mental health disorder. Again, you have to meet the criteria. So people look at your home and they say, you're a hoarder. Again, these days we don't use that because it stops people from actually seeking help. You know, they don't want to be called a hoarder, because you are more than your diagnoses. You're a person, you have value. And when people use that H word, they kind of stop you from coming in, and they don't allow themselves to get help, which is what we want to do because it impacts their safety issues there.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk about like the situational clutter kind of thing, I can absolutely relate to that. Um I have a mental health diagnosis, and sometimes that comes with severe depression, and it is hard to take care of a home, when you're in that kind of place. And so um I I didn't realize that there was an actual diagnosis for hoarding, because I also feel like people do use that term
Right.
way too liberally, right?
Absolutely.
Like I don't have problems throwing things away, or that kind of stuff. It's just my life gets crazy sometimes, and
Right.
I can't manage
Right.
my environment. I get better, the environment gets better, that kind of thing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, that totally makes
Yeah. It's and people that have issues with clutter and what everybody calls hoarding, that is just one aspect of it. When you add in other mental health issues, when you add in, the depression and the anxiety, um, OCD, bipolar, all those things. And most of the people have a combination of a number of mental health issues. Oh, and then they have too much stuff, which impacts their life. One of the other things in the last few years that has really grown is ADHD. So if you have ADHD, it makes it really hard to organize and to declutter or do anything. So you bring that in, and your anxiety and your depression, and too much stuff, and you have a mess. So it's a lot to deal with. And which one do you work on?
yeah.
What kind of help do you get? Who's going to help you? It's complicated.
Yeah, wow. So can you expand a little bit on that? What kind of person hoards, and the mechanism behind that, why they
Right.
do that?
The kind of person, basically, if you walk down the street and look at anybody, those would be the people. Everybody thinks it's uneducated, lower income people, on welfare. And I'm like, so I teach, a number of classes for people with chronic disorganization and hoarding issues. I've had therapists in my class. I've had nurses and medical professionals. I've had heads of company. I've had heads of departments at universities. I've had regular people. You can't tell that somebody has an issue with hoarding by looking at them or by what they do or anything else, because you're not in their home. They're not letting you in. They can come to work in suits and have a high-powered position. You don't know what's going on. You don't know that, they're having a bad day, so they go out and shop. They just got a raise, so they go out and shop. All this stuff is in their home. And for some people, it actually never gets out of the bag. If they don't take the tags off, it's the high of the buy, and things aren't leaving. Causes financial issues because you're buying stuff, constantly. Safety, there's no walk paths to get from room to room. There's all kinds of issues. There's all different types of people, and there's different reasons for it. For some people, this is the way they grew up. This is all they know. For some people, it was a trauma, whether it's, as a child. I had a client that grew up, didn't have any food in the house. And to this day, she's close to 70. She thinks she's starving, and she has tons and tons of food, constantly buying more stuff, but it's that trauma of a child. For some people, as they got older, they had another trauma. They might have been assaulted, that causes a trauma. So they build walls of stuff in their home, and they never leave their house. Okay, there's so many different reasons for it. For a lot of people, they don't even know why. They just have stuff. And one of the things that we talk about in the class that I teach, the Buried in Treasures class is to start uncovering, do you remember when this started? Do you ever remember a time that you didn't have this clutter? And they start remembering, oh, when this happened, all of a sudden after that, it got overwhelming and then it was out of control. So there's so many different reasons for it. It's just when are you going to stop it to have the life you deserve? So for a lot of people, their family members won't let the grandkids come over because it's dangerous. You can't walk in there. It's isolating. People won't let their friends over. So that's very isolating. They don't tell anybody. People don't know. They won't have the electricians or the plumbers come to their home, even though they don't have running water. They have no electricity. They're too embarrassed, to have people come over. So again, you have no idea what goes on behind closed doors or why this happened. They're out at the mall and they look just like regular people. You don't know. Again, but I think one of the hardest issues is that you can talk about mental health. You can talk about OCD, bipolar, schizophrenia, do anything. You mentioned that H word, conversation stops. People won't talk to you. You will lose your friends, which is another reason they don't seek help. But if you want to be able to, have a better life without that clutter, at least being able to use your rooms, being able to use your kitchen, being able to take a shower, you need help because you really can't do it alone. So whether it's, being in a group coaching, being in a class, having, a therapist. I have had clients that've been in therapy 10 years. Their therapist does not know that they have an issue with hoarding, a severe issue with hoarding. And the other side of that coin is it is really impossible to find a therapist that has any knowledge of hoarding, besides what they've seen on TV, that actually works with people with hoarding issues, that will even accept a client with hoarding issues. It's almost impossible to find one, which again makes it hard because you want a combination. You want some therapy to work on some of your other issues, if they can at least work on the other mental health issues. And then you've got somebody helping you in your home or in a class and have some, family support that will get you moving, to that better life of less clutter, of less stress. But it's a really, really hard thing to get people to ask for help, to actually try to find help. And then they get very depressing because it's so hard to find help out there, which is one reason, the classes that I teach are virtual. I have clients in Australia. I have clients in the UK, London, Scotland, all over Mexico, Puerto Rico, all over. It's an international, it is a world problem. But again, the H word is not talked about. So.
So you mentioned the Buried in Treasures class. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
The Buried in Treasures class was designed by the authors of it's Drs. Tolan, Frost, and Steketee. They're the ones that wrote the book. And so we use the book. It is a 16-week class. It is very structured. We'll use, a lot of the, cognitive behavioral therapy. We go through the chapters. We do, some of the different experiments and exposures and things throughout the book and throughout the class. It is a very confidential. Only the people that are registered can be in it. It is not for family members or social workers. This is for people that have a problem with clutter, chronic disorganization, and hoarding issues. It is now used throughout the United States. More and more people in some of the other states are using this program because because it works. At least it is the first step. People that come to the class, first thing I say to them, you know what, you're not the only one. And they all think, yes, I am. They get into class and it's like, oh my goodness, this is my tribe. People understand me, there is no judgment, there is support. And hearing everybody's stories, and everybody's like, this is how I feel. This happened to me. I don't know what to do. And now they've got a group, it's a group coaching, it's that support, it's the accountability. We will read a chapter most of the weeks. There's, assignments that you do, throughout the 16 weeks. And, we talk about kind of what's hard. We learn to stop the acquiring. We come up with a different list and things on what are some questions you can ask yourself. What are your questions you can ask yourself when you're trying to declutter? So I always call it a brain dump. You make a list. When was the last time you wore it? When was the last time you used it? Do you even like this? Is it broken? Does it work? Why are you keeping a broken lamp that doesn't work? So just think of all of the questions that you can write down. Same thing with acquiring. I can only buy this if I have the money for it, if it's an actual need and not a want. Do I have a place for it? And, I drill down and say, exactly, tell me exactly where you're going to put that item. Not just, it's going to look really nice in my home. You don't have any room. So let's make a list of when can you acquire, learning to stop the acquiring, learning to start letting go. And that's the emotional part of it, because it's the emotional attachment, and everybody has that. If your mother gave you something, your grandmother gave you something, that's special. There's that attachment. The problem is when I have a client and you have, both people have the stuff from their parents and their grandparents, and they try to bring both furniture into their home, which is already crowded. It doesn't work. But it's that, well, it was my grandmother's, I can't get rid of it, but there's no room in your home. So again, learning to let these things go, being able to say, love this stuff, but they don't want me to have the clutter. I can write a story about what this means to me. I can take a picture. There's ways to keep the memories, but letting go of the stuff that doesn't fit into your home, into your lifestyle. And that's one of the other things. Are you living your fantasy self? I have clients that want to do all these crafts or sports and things, and a client bought a parachute. Have you ever been skydiving? No. Then why do you have this? Have you ever been skiing? No, but I think I'd like to. You don't need to buy a whole, skis and ski. You've never done this. We all have these fantasies of things we're going to do, but we don't. Or, I'm going to do all this sewing. I have 2 sewing machines and, a room full of fabric. Have you ever sewed? No. Again, your fantasy self. So how can we let go of these things? So we talk about a lot of these different things during the class, but again, it's support, it's the accountability, it's, hey, what did you do this week? Again, you don't need to spend 8 hours decluttering. For some people, especially if they're older or have physical limitations, 10 minutes, 15 minutes at a time. Do that a couple of times a day. It's never going to get done. Well, if you don't do anything, it's definitely not going to get done. You got to do something. I don't care. It's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, every day, 3 times a week, 5 times it doesn't matter. Do something for any amount of time. Just keep moving. And then, of course, they want the magic wand. The magic wand is doing something and seeing that you just cleared up space. Just get rid of all those mismatched socks with holes that you're never going to fix. That's something. I mean, go through your junk drawer and throw out those, 10 million ketchup packages from the fast food place. That's something. It doesn't have to be this all day. I'm going to do my entire house in 1 week. That's not going to happen. That's setting yourself up for failure. And we want to set you up for success. So just really moving ahead with, doing something. So again, we talk about this, we learn how to, organize, how to make categories. People don't know how to do that. We talk about procrastination and perfectionism. That's a huge thing. And well, if you're a perfectionist, how can you have clutter?
Right.
Because you can't make a decision because everything has to be perfect. If I can't do it perfectly, I'm not doing it. Just I don't have the stuff, I don't have the time, I don't have this, that, and the other. Okay. And I just think that that's hysterical. I'm like, well, I like things to be perfect, you know. So again, it's everybody has all these different issues. It's when you have so many things going on that impacts you that you can't do anything. And the other part of it is, probably most of my clients, unless I'm there, unless you're in a group, unless somebody is with you, you don't do anything. Just like people going, um, jogging or, walking. If you have somebody else with you, you're going to do it. You know, you're not going to exercise at home. Most people don't. If you go to a club, and see other people, you're going to do it because they're all doing it. When you're in a class and, the instructor says, now we're going to do sit-ups and we're going to do, that you're going to do because everybody else is doing. So in a group setting, you're more likely to be engaged and actually do things. If somebody is with you while you're decluttering, even if they're just sitting there, you're going to do something. So again, that support is really crucial in this process.
So you talked about the class and that it's not for family members or that kind of thing. Can you
Right.
tell me about how somebody gets into the class? Like, how do you make decisions about who belongs in the class? That kind of thing.
They either call me or email me. I send out a short little questionnaire. I want to make sure that they are a good fit for the class. I've had, I just want to learn about this and help a friend. No, because in the class you're talking about things that are going on. You're talking about yourself. You get to share as much or as little as you want, but the people in the class have to be comfortable being in the class sharing, not, somebody just wants to learn about, hoarding issues. So, I have a few questions I ask them about, their clutter, how long has it been going on? Have they gotten any help or anything like that, just to make sure they're really a good fit for the class, and then send them a registration form. Again, I run a morning class and an evening class. And then again, it's 16 weeks, which sounds really long.
It does.
It goes so fast. In the first few weeks, it's like, oh my goodness. By the end of the class, I'm like, oh, I'm going to miss you guys, and everybody's like, we don't want to leave. We want to go every week. I mean, it's amazing. The class really, they tend to bond really quickly. And I've had people, so I've been doing this for, over 9 years, teaching these classes. And there are still groups that after the class is done, will get together weekly or every other week and keep in touch. And the last 2 years, I've been doing kind of a get together in December for anybody in any of the classes, just to stop in and say, hey, how have you guys been doing? And we still keep in touch. Then after the class is over, I do a monthly coaching group. So once a month for people, just for that accountability. But if 16 weeks is too long, I've also run a condensed 8-week version of the class. that they can also, go into for people that just don't think they have time. But then again, I've had people take that class and then go into the 16-week class or vice. Some people will take the class numerous times because they just need weekly accountability. They need that weekly support. Again, and that's what makes it work is the support, the non-judgment, the, being able to, learn all of these different things. Because again, if you've had this issue for 10, 20, 50 years, and I have people in the class this has been going on that long, it's going to take more than a few weeks to unlearn this and also physically do the decluttering. So again, it's complex. And, as I said, I always urge them to, try to add that mental therapy piece to it all. So again, just for anxiety or depression or other things that are going on, because that really makes a difference. And, you know, getting them moving in the right direction. So.
Yeah. So one of the other things that you do, you started and you run the Missoula Hoarding Task Force. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Started that, I can't remember how long, maybe like 9, 10 years ago. I was asked to do a talk for county health, and I thought it'd be a couple of people, and I think like 20 people showed up. And I'm like, you guys really need to talk to each other and find out, what types of support you can give the people here. And I said, you guys need a task force so that everybody gets together. And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And of course, it didn't happen. And talked to every mayor and to aging services, and they just didn't have the people. They're like, oh, you need to do this. I'm like, it's not the way it's usually done. And it's usually a mental health group starts it, but there was nobody else. So at our first meeting, I think there were about 15, 20 people at the meeting. So it's basically bringing together different social service agencies. I've had, the fire and police there, some of the different groups. I've had, a couple of therapists there. We'll have a speaker every now and then. And it's basically for people to get together and ask questions because, again, a lot of therapists, all the social workers in the various mental health agencies, throughout the state. And I've had people from, different, cities throughout Montana, come to our meetings, which are now virtual, and just ask questions or bring, kind of do a case review of, I have this client, this is what happened, I'm not sure what to do. So that everybody is really supportive and has ideas of what kind of resources are out there. Who has what resources? How can we come together and try to work on this issue? So it's just a supportive group that will come together. Different people will come to the meetings at different times of the year to ask questions and just learn more about hoarding issues.
I just want to back up for a minute to how people get into the class. So, do you have to have this diagnosis?
No,
hoarding disorder?
and that's what they think is that you have to have an actual diagnosis, and you don't, because most people don't,
right?
Because most doctors really don't know a lot or anything about it. Most people, again, haven't told their therapist they have this issue because it's very hidden. Again, you can talk about being bipolar and anything else. They don't mention the H word. So it's just people that are just overwhelmed with clutter, that have a lot of clutter, that want to start making changes to their life, that, want to let some of this stuff go and just don't know how. So if clutter, chronic disorganization, or hoarding is an issue, reach out and, we can see if, this class will be a good fit. even if you just show up to the class, listen, you know, read the book, you know, even if you're too embarrassed to share, some of your stories, just being there makes a huge difference. But as I said, within a couple of weeks, it's that bonding of, wow, it's like these people really understand and they're not judging me. And you learn so much, during the class on, you know, kind of how to stop this and how to make changes. Even if your house is not going to be magazine perfect, tell you that up front, but there will be this whole mindset shift of, now I understand why I'm doing this. I didn't realize that I was acquiring because, I was upset, or, because I was so happy, or I'm trying to make other people happy. So I'm constantly buying things. You know, they didn't realize that, they don't realize, why they're not letting go. Well, because somebody gave it to me. I can't, that's great. But if it's affecting you, if you can't walk, through your living room to the kitchen to the bedroom, that's a problem. Again, so we always start with, the harm reduction approach of, it you keep all your stuff, keep everything. Walk paths, egress. You need to be able to get out the door, you need to be able to get out a window. I'd like you not to have anything on your stove because everybody puts paper on their stove and everything else. I need your stove to work. I need your shower to work. Other than that, hey, if we, kind of stack things better, and organize things better, you could probably have all your stuff. But again, safety first. And then we look at, okay, let's maybe declutter a little and organize this better, and kind of stop spending your money buying things you don't need and have no room for. It's safety first, and just getting them to feel better about themselves, that you're not your diagnosis, you're not your stuff. And I like to say that I only accept really awesome clients because my clients are so talented. Here in Montana, everybody, quilts or knits or sews or make jewelry. They're so talented. They're awesome people. They just have stuff, so again, it's the support. If you can support, these people, and, look at them as a person, that has something to offer, they're going to let you in. They're going to talk to you. They're going to let you help, and they're going to feel more comfortable. And that's what it's about. It's teaching them that there's more people out there like this than not. And this is just one part of you. And if it's bothering you, then it's a problem. And if it's bothering you, there is help available. You can learn some of these things. And that's what the group is about, is being that support, and teaching them things. And again, that whole mindset shift of, okay, this is what's happening, and now I understand it, and now maybe I can stop some of these behaviors, and I can learn things. So.
When you talk about the 16 weeks, and yes, it does seem like a long time, but I understand, like, it might take people 3 or 4 weeks to really start to open up and to start to make those connections with the other people in the group, and getting that peer support, really,
Right,
like getting support from each other in the same situations and stuff. But it's like it's a structured, closed 16 weeks,
yes,
right?
it is very, very structured. And there's homework, practice assignments. Every week I'll say, hey, we're going to read this chapter, and there's questionnaires in the book. It said, they actually write in the book.
Hmm.
So when you're taught not to write in books, that was kind of hard. Don't write in your books. You know, I'm like, I can't write in this book. But you actually write in the book, you do these exercises, and then we talk about it. And the really interesting thing about writing, so a lot of people will journal. When you write things down, it kind of gets in your brain.
Mhm.
It makes it real. When somebody's asking you a question, if you actually write down the answer, you start thinking about it, and it's like, oh my, okay. Then you start looking at these answers, and you're like, wow, I didn't know I was doing this. I didn't know I felt this way. So taking that pen to paper is powerful. So going through these exercises and then talking about them, in the class. And as I said, really, it's within 2 weeks, everybody is, really bonded and comfortable. It's amazing. Um, but again, by the time the 16 weeks is over, nobody wants to leave because it's a journey. It really is. And you really learn a lot about yourself and kind of what was underneath all this and why it's happening. And again, it's the support, to learn to let some of these things go. And we always talk about, what are your wins and challenges, through every class. And when somebody has a win, everybody's like super awesome. They're cheering for you, which is, a really, big thing. And the other thing that we talk about is goals and values. And in the last few years, and I go to a lot of seminars and conferences with, all of the, top professionals, on hoarding issues. And goals and values has been one of the biggest topics in the last few years, because if what you're doing doesn't align with your goals or your values, how are you going to change? So we talk about that a lot, because you're saying you want to live in this less cluttered house, but you're not doing anything about it. That's not aligning. So again, it's when we bring these things up, it makes you think. So there's a lot of thinking, in class of like, what's going on here? So,
So tell me a little about the structure of the class. Like, how often does it meet?
It's this class starts February 4th. And so there's a 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. morning class. They're on Wednesdays, and a 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. So that starts that. And my 8-week class starts March 10th, and that's a Tuesday. And I only do an evening, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. class. And that's an 8-week group. So again, very condensed. You try to take all the really important things and squish it in, which is really hard. That class is an hour and a half. And, also add more things on paper and time management, which is a really huge thing. Number one issue is paper. Everybody loves to keep paper in books, so that's a huge issue. And then really working on your time management. And if you can't manage your time, if you don't put the time into it, I'm all about the scheduling. If it's not on your calendar, it's not going to happen. So again, going through, some of those things.
Great. So if somebody's interested in the class, how do they get a hold of you?
They can call me, and my number is area code 440-666-9326, or they can email me at kefconsulting@gmail.com. So K as in kite, E as in Edward, F as in Frank, CONSULTING, kefconsulting@gmail.com, and shoot me an email. I can send them a bunch of information and get them into our system.
Great. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. Again, it's complex. There's a lot to it. You don't have to have a diagnosis. If you have clutter and it bothers you, this class is going to help. So
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me today.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yep. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you much. Bye-bye.
There's always hope.
Recovery is possible. Recovery works.
There is hope in recovery.
Healing takes time.
Recovery means resilience.
You can get through anything. Recovery works.
Recovery rocks!